I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head to the shot. At the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Today, we are continuing our conversation on Tampa Bay Buccaneers free agency. The last time we talked to you guys, we said there were more moves to be made, and there certainly have been more moves made. The Buccaneers have been busy this week, a lot of transactions, a lot of departures. We're going to put a grade on it and talk about it the best that we can. Welcome back to another edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. Joining us from an undisclosed location via satellite. Pleasure to have you here, Evan.
Yeah, thanks. I cannot disclose the location. Unfortunately, can't have people tracking me. Whether it be people I want tracking me or people I don't want tracking me. But yeah, regardless though, the Buccaneers are making some moves in free agency. Obviously, the big ones are pretty much out of the way, right? But they've made a couple of depth signings along the way here, re-signing guys plus adding some guys from the outside as well.
They got you tapped. Whether you like it or not, you're on a list of some sort by this point. So we just have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, plenty of news to talk about for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And ultimately, Evan, what we want to find out today is, did the Bucs get any better? Did they address the holes that we knew they were headed into this offseason with? On both sides of the football, we will try and break down some of these moves in particular. We'll talk about the deals. We'll talk about the departures as well. But let's just pick up right where we left off. So the last time we did a show, the Buccaneers, rapid fire right out of the gate, had signed Chris Godwin, Ben Bredeson, Hassan Reddick. Not necessarily in that order, but very shortly, one after another, the news broke of each of those guys returning for 2025. Since then, the Buccaneers have made a few more moves. We will look at the re-signings first. Here is a list of the guys who are back. We had mentioned Chris Godwin on the last episode, 3 years, $66 million, which, I mean, we've said it before, we'll say it again, that is one hell of a deal. I know reports of his market going up. You can argue all day if those were exaggerated, but the fact that you got a wide receiver of Chris Godwin on your roster of his caliber for as much as they are paying per season right now, that is a very team-friendly deal. Ben Bredeson back on a 3-year deal. Levante David back on a 1-year deal. Anthony Nelson, the outside linebacker, who, if I'm not mistaken, I think both of us were kind of up in the air on whether he would be back with the Buccaneers, especially considering, one, his salary on his old contract, and two, the Buccaneers' pass rush problems over the last couple of seasons. But Anthony Nelson returns, 2 years, $10 million for the outside linebacker here. Evan, your thoughts?
You're right about that being up in the air. I thought it was sort of a 50-50 on whether Nelson would be back. And I don't think it's the end of the world. Do I think would I have maybe gone out and try and found somebody just different to play that role? Maybe. I would have maybe looked for just a fresh face there, right? But Nelson obviously knows the area, knows the defense well, has played in it for, I think this is going to be year 7 with the Buccaneers. So, it's fine. It's fine from familiar depth. Again, the Reddick signing and this Nelson signing doesn't really prevent them from potentially picking an edge rusher in the first round. I know we're not doing draft coverage yet, but picking an edge rusher in the first round or even on day 2, right? Picking one of those guys early. I don't think either of these moves really prevent that. So it's a fine move. But yeah, one that would have been fine without, but I'm not going to, really bash him over the head for it.
I felt the same way about this re-signing here along the defensive line. That is big D tackle Greg Gaines, and we had talked about that on the last episode. I didn't mind the idea of Greg Gaines coming back. I think Greg Gaines coming back under the guise of not playing as many snaps as he did last season is going to be a major selling point. It's a 1-year, $3.5 million deal for Greg Gaines. He is a depth guy, but he's a depth guy that, dare I say, the Bucs have been able to rely on. Again, I know he wasn't fantastic down the stretch last year, but he played probably the most snaps of his career, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Bucs have every intention of keeping him on the field less in 2025. So it's a 1-year deal for big Greg Gaines.
Yeah, and it's again somebody who would I have been opposed to getting somebody else in that role? No, but again, he's the guy who knows the defense well, and right now the interior defensive line is looking pretty almost identical to what it was last season. Obviously, we still have the rest of free agency, and you still have an entire draft. So I would bet that the Buccaneers make at least one more addition along that interior defensive line. Not saying it's going to be anything major or they're going to invest a major draft pick in it, but I would expect them to add there at some point.
A guy that has really grown on me, and I know that I've brought up his name a few times, but defensive tackle C.J. Brewer, at one point a practice squad player, 1 year, $960,000. I mean, sub $1 million deal. We're talking about a rotational depth guy, but C.J. Brewer quite literally getting out of the mud here, so I like to see him back. And then outside linebacker Daniel Greziak on a 1 year, $840,000 deal. Safety Kayvon Merriweather, another rotational depth guy, but reliable depth for the Buccaneers at this point when you consider how much he has played. 1 year, $1.03 million for Kayvon Merriweather. Another big re-signing here, and a lot of opinions about this, but I don't know why there are so many opinions about a backup quarterback, but quarterback Kyle Trask is back in Tampa Bay on a 1 year, $2.78 million deal. And this little write-up here and free agency tracker, courtesy of pewterreport.com. Their entire staff always do great work. Make sure you go check it out. The Bucs re-signed quarterback Kyle Trask to compete with Michael Pratt for the right to back up Baker Mayfield. Trask's deal is 1 year for $2.787 million, but every team gets to use a 4-year qualifier deal on a player who was on the roster for 4 consecutive seasons. Because Trask fits that role, he will only count $1.3 million against the cap in 2025. The Buccaneers do like Michael Pratt. I mean, we said on the last show, he got his own Topps Chrome card. So at this point, do you expect a legitimate quarterback battle here for QB2?
Yeah, I don't think Trask is guaranteed anything, especially, with that type of contract that he signed. Again, he was another guy who was kind of 50-50 on whether or not he'd be back. Maybe I thought, man, maybe he did look for that, right, out in the market. Maybe there wasn't really a situation. Figured he would maybe look for a team that had a less defined QB role, basically. Maybe a team that, well, if he plays well enough or if their QB struggles, he might get in, or a QB that maybe has had some injury concerns in the past. That maybe he'll get in and play. He decides to return to Tampa. But yeah, I do think that there's going to be a competition here because you're right. They do like Michael Pratt. They wanted to actually draft Michael Pratt last year. Weren't able to do so. Ended up getting him a little bit later. But I do think that they like Michael Pratt, and the money that Kyle Trask got doesn't really scream that, like, hey, you're definitely our backup. So I do think there's going to be some sort of competition there for the spot behind Baker Mayfield.
Some more reinforcements in the secondary. Tampa Bay signed former Lions cornerback Kendall Vildor to a 1-year deal for the veteran signing benefit. This move is an attempt to upgrade special teams and the depth at corner. Vildor, who has 30 career starts, adds more experience to the room as young players like Josh Hayes and Tyreek Funderburk, who was an undrafted free agent last year, really struggled on defense during their limited playing time in 2024. The Bucs lacked veteran depth at cornerback after losing Bryce Hall to a broken leg in week 1. Now, it seems like whenever things happen in the secondary, again, people always get very opinionated, but I think an important bit of context for that Buccaneers secondary in 2024, we've talked time and time again about the injury troubles. They couldn't field the same guys week in and week out. It felt like you had a rotating lineup, but the catalyst of all of that is before the regular season even begins. I mean, maybe his second or third day of practice, they lose Bryce Hall for the season, which, was shaping up to be, I don't know how promising of a signing, but it would have been more reinforcements than the Buccaneers had in 2024. regardless, they go out and they get their guy, and he will help out on special teams quite a bit as well. I think the hope is not to have Vildor on the starting lineup week in and week out. He will help out, but yeah, I just I like the move here. You get some help for the secondary.
Yeah, it's cornerback depth, right? And we'll talk about the departures a little bit later, but this matters because Javier Thomas, right, ends up heading elsewhere. So, yeah, I mean, it's depth who can play special teams. Yeah, you hope that he doesn't really get in and play significant snaps, right? Because that's not what he was signed for. So I'm not saying he can't do it. He did do it for the Lions last year because they had their fair share of injuries. Vildor had to come in and play a little bit. But, yeah, the Bucs are – and, again, corner is another position a lot like edge, where it would not shock me, and I actually think it's pretty likely that they're going to address that fairly early in the draft, maybe even as early as the first round. So I don't think they're necessarily done at corner either.
Some more moves on the defensive side of the ball. The Bucs saw inside linebacker KJ Britt depart for the Dolphins. I don't know many fans who were going to be too upset by that move. But the team countered right away. They signed former Dolphins inside linebacker Anthony Walker. The veteran linebackers will be swapping teams looking for fresh starts. Walker adds starting experience. He has 99 games played in his career. 83 of those have been starts. And he does have a productive track record across 8 NFL seasons. He will be behind Lavonte David and likely SirVocea Dennis on the depth chart. But signing the 29-year-old to a 1-year deal adds someone who has proven himself capable of handling middle-of-the-field responsibilities. When you go down the list of free agent signings so far for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when you go direct comparison, direct replacement, KJ Britt to Anthony Walker, this is one of the more apparent clear upgrades, I think, so far this free agency for Tampa Bay. I like this move a lot.
He was actually back whenever they signed Don Reddick.
Hey, can you hear me? We got you in and out. Can you hear me? Check 1, 2.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I got you coming in more clear now. Start that from the top.
Just fine.
Start that from the top, just because we got cut off there.
Okay. Anthony Walker, Bucs company back because it's 2024, not so good. It's 2023 though. Was like,
oh, this is brutal. You there? Did we lose him completely? Oh my goodness gracious.
I'm here. I can speak.
Oh, buddy.
I can hear you fine.
You're good. Are you able to move around in your house by chance? Or I know you're not necessarily cooped up in a house, but is there? Yeah, everyone's worried about you. They want to make sure you're okay. I told you they got you tapped. They're running interference. They're trying to get you before the end of the show. You sound a little bit better now, but try one more time. Your take on Anthony Walker here.
Anthony Walker, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
So, Bucs hoping to bounce back, right? 2024 was not very kind. Yeah, he was much better. Coverage. A lot of Bucs fans are going to be paying. If they get the 2023 version of Anthony Walker, could be a pretty good.
All right, loud and clear. We heard you, buddy. I'm going to take your word for it, and we're going to have some fun in post-production with that one. But let's go ahead and move on here. Some more reinforcements in that linebacker room. And again, a veteran presence. I think the drop-off between Lavonte David and SirVocea Dennis had some people concerned. So Walker can serve as a bit of a buffer here, especially if they get that 2023 version of him like Evan was attempting to say. But some good depth I have seen people mention about Anthony Walker here. Here is a big one as well. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost valuable swing tackle Justin Skule to Minnesota in free agency. This one hurts a bit because Skule was so reliable filling in for Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke. Without a viable swing tackle on the roster to replace him, the Bucs now need to find one in free agency or the 2025 draft? Well, luckily, the Buccaneers answered once again, this time in the form of offensive tackle Charlie Heck, who they signed from Houston, spent a little bit of time with the San Francisco 49ers, but he is your new swing tackle. And we will take a look here at the Buccaneers' new additions in free agency before we toss it back over to Evan as well. Punter Riley Dixon, 2 years, $6 million. Varying opinions from Denver fans on the capability of Dixon as a punter, but he is a familiar name, and he is head and shoulders better than what the Buccaneers attempted to trot on the field in 2024. So hopefully they just go out, they get their guy, and we don't have to talk this much about the punter position in the future. Evan, your thoughts here on these last few moves? Charlie Heck being a new offensive tackle and a depth piece for this Buccaneers offensive line, and then Riley Dixon at the punter spot.
First off, can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can. You're coming in much better now.
Okay.
They just didn't want you to. They didn't want your take on Anthony Walker, I guess.
I know. So the Charlie Heck thing obviously replaced Justin School. I would have probably preferred Justin School if we're being honest. If we're just being completely honest here, I think I don't know if the Buccaneers tried. It could be a spot where the player just wanted to move on. Who knows? But I mean, they filled the role pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Heck is a big dude. He's big as heck. He's like 6'8", 6'7", so he is a tall dude. Has played in the league a couple years, bounced around from team to team. So yeah, he is going to replace Justin School essentially. So we'll see how that works out. As far as Riley Dixon, look, I think Dixon is an average punter, but that's much better than what the Buccaneers got in 2024. If Jake Camarda had been average, he probably still is on the team.
Yeah.
If Trenton Gill had been average, he's probably still on the team. If Jack Browning had been average, he's probably still here. So I think with the Bucs, you're just hoping for improved play there, and I think they upgraded. So that's all you can really ask for, and that's fine.
Yeah, some of the big departures before we put a grade on it so far. We had mentioned the moves on the offensive line, but Robert Hainsey, this is one that we've talked about before, said that he's potentially going to try and take a starting job somewhere else, and that somewhere else is apparently Jacksonville. They signed Big Bob Hainsey to a 3-year, $21 million deal. A bit of a prove-it deal, but he gets some cushion in that 3 years. I hope that, he ends up taking the starting job and running with it. A very talented player. Still not the biggest fan of the head coach up there in Jacksonville, but there are some guys on that roster that you do want to see succeed. Outside linebacker Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has moved on to the Cleveland Browns, a 1-year, $4.75 million deal. Before we go any further, wanted to get your 2 cents on those two departures there. Both sides of the line here. Robert Hainsey and JTS decide to move on.
And it's two guys that were drafted by the Bucs and has played significant roles for the Bucs, right? Like both have been starters for this team. So significant, especially Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, right? For a first-round pick. Moving on. Obviously, I don't think either one was a surprise, right? I think we were both kind of expecting both to be gone. So, yeah, I mean, for Hainsey, he'll get an opportunity to be the starter there in Jacksonville. Their offensive line is not a strong suit, so he'll get an opportunity there. And Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, probably in a rotation, that's probably where he's best served. I think he can be a solid rotational edge defender. He's just not a starter, and it simply wasn't going to happen in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, playing behind the $40 million man in Myles Garrett up there in Cleveland. And then a couple of departures that we already mentioned. Defensive back Tavier Thomas goes to the Vikings on a 1-year deal. KJ Britt to the Dolphins on a 1-year deal. And Justin Skule to the Minnesota Vikings on a 1-year deal. I had to bite my tongue there and not make the joke. I didn't want to steal it. Tampa Bay salary.
Pretty good.
Tampa Bay salary cap room. This is as of yesterday. 24 hours ago, pretty much on the dot, 24 hours and 2 minutes ago, this was updated. According to overthecap.com, the Buccaneers have $9.4 million in cap space, but this does not include the deal for any of the new signings yet. The Bucs didn't pick up the second-year option for safety Jordan Whitehead, so that created an additional $4.5 million in cap room. The Buccaneers' assistant general manager Mike Greenberg can always restructure the contracts of quarterback Baker Mayfield, safety Antoine Winfield Jr., and left tackle Tristan Wirfs, or part ways with cornerback Jamel Dean to create more cap room. Let me ask you about Jamel Dean, just because last time we had talked, again, kind of up in the air. I can understand both sides of the argument here if the Buccaneers want to move on, but the question that you always have to ask when you move on from a starter, is there an option out there that's better? The Bucs are looking to get better and improve throughout this free agency. If keeping Jamel Dean around, if the cost of doing that outweighs the cost of risking it on a cheaper option who isn't going to be as good. I know Jamel Dean wasn't great in 2024. I know his availability has been up and down, and fans are very opinionated on the guy, but he's a hell of a lot better than some of the options left on the table when you look at what's available at corner, at least in free agency. And I can't imagine there's going to be a rookie that you put in that spot that's going to do much better.
No, I mean, at this point, when you're looking at the market and you're looking at the corners that are left, you're right. You have to kind of weigh, all right, well, how big is the drop-off from player X that we can get for $3 million cheaper if we just cut Dean versus keeping Dean? Because if you're going to make your team worse just to save money, well, I don't know if you really want to be doing that, right? So, I mean, Asante Samuel Jr. is really the biggest name left, I guess, in the corner market, barring anybody unexpected, being released. Which could always happen, obviously, but I don't really view him as a Bucs fit. I don't really think he's a guy that they're going to be after. So, yeah, I mean, after thinking that Jamel Dean was going to be gone, it looks like he may be here, at least for now. And again, I do expect them to address corner early, but if they draft a guy in the first or second round, they're not going to make him cornerback one on day one. So I think the Bucs at this point kind of hoping that, well, for the price tag you're getting Jamel Dean at, you sort of hope for a bounce back season.
Here are the remaining free agents for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These guys may or may not be back. Just have to see how things shake out in their current situation. Running back Chase Edmonds, wide receiver Sterling Shepard, offensive guard Royce Newman, offensive guard Sua Opeta, defensive tackle Will Golston, defensive tackle Eric Banks, outside linebacker Shaq Barrett, inside linebacker J.J. Russell, cornerback Bryce Hall, who we just talked about, cornerback Troy Hill, safety Mike Edwards, safety Ryan Neal, and safety Jordan Whitehead. Ryan Neal, I forgot that was a late season addition. I think that gave a lot of fans PTSD when they saw that Twitter update come across their phone. But his future yet to be seen. Evan, let's go ahead and put a grade on it here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in free agency. We have covered just about every move they have made so far. I think most of the moves are behind us. I think between now and
maybe some minor things, but
right between now and the NFL draft, just depth signings, minor signings, like you said, situational things. I'm gonna say A-. Again, the question that we wanted to tackle here. The big thing that we wanted to tackle is, did the Buccaneers improve? When you look at this roster and you look at the holes that they went into this free agency period and offseason with, did they address that in a convincing manner? Did they address it enough to make you think that, yeah, there's a chance if this goes right, if this plays out the way that they hope it will, then they will be a better football team? I do feel that way. I think that there is still an element of risk when you look at some of these signings. You're talking about leaning on young talent. Hassan Reddick, I think, is a guy who is capable of making this worth the investment and then some. He just has to show up. But you're relying on him to show up. I think Anthony Walker is a guy who can show up and will show up, but you're relying on him to return to form a little bit. Bringing back Chris Godwin on the deal that they got him at. I know he's coming off of injury. People are going to say that he's getting older. Colin Cowherd said this week that the Buccaneers are getting older, which is really weird because they're like top 3 youngest team in the NFL. But regardless, guys like Mike Evans and Levante David are getting older, and injuries have been a concern at some point. But with everything that we've seen so far, I'm going to give them an A- here. I think I think this free agency felt like a good free agency for Jason Light, but it felt like what he normally does, but it also felt more efficient in a way. I feel like sometimes his process drags out a few more weeks than what we've experienced so far. I think he was really able to knock out everything in the first 2 or 3 days, and that left fans feeling fairly secure about the rest of the moves that were going to be made. But Evan, what's your thoughts and ultimate grade on Buccaneers free agency so far?
Yeah, I'll probably go with a B plus. I think they improved in the pass rush, right? If Hassan Reddick bounces back, which track record, right? When you look at the back of the baseball card, basically, you got a guy who has had multiple seasons of double-digit sacks. Not saying he's going to get double-digit sacks here, but like I imagine he's going to be better than he was in New York last year, right? So I think you improve the pass rush. Obviously, didn't really do much at corner besides add some depth. But there was a few things, right? Like I would have probably preferred to keep Tavier Thomas over Kendall Vildor. I would have preferred to keep Justin School over Charlie Heck. So minor things. The other things like Anthony Nelson, Greg Gaines. I wouldn't have hated to see just different players in those roles. I'm not saying those guys are bad players. I just think this defense needs some fresh blood, basically, right? And all you really have right now, who's going to play a significant role, is Hassan Reddick, pretty much. So so that's the only person you've added that from like the outside who's going to be a significant player for you. And there's still time, right? They still could add somebody. There's still not a ton of big names out there, but there still are some guys, and guys get cut and everything, so you never know. But so far, yeah, I mean, I'll give it a B plus. I think they've improved, and I think still think there's still some work to be done.
I think it's a fair point too, because when we talked about the pass rush before, really when describing this Buccaneers defensive line, and I guess defense overall, you can count the linebackers too, the way that they're used in this Todd Bowles defense, but we both kind of came to the agreement that, it feels like the defense is at an impasse, I think is the way that we had described it. It feels like they've just plateaued in a way. And I think a significant revamp or the introduction of some new players, some new blood, as you put it, it could go a long way. So I think that just adding Hassan Reddick isn't going to fix too much, but I do think it is one of the more significant moves they could have made. They could have easily signed a pedestrian pass rusher, and they are, again, taking a risk on this guy. They're putting up a good amount of money, but I feel like in the long run, the results are going to be worth it just because of, looking at the back of the baseball card. He's been there. He's done that before. He's been one of the NFL's top pressure guys. I would like to see him do that again. But really, that is, I think, everything that needs to be covered so far. When it comes to Tampa Bay Buccaneers free agency, a little bit more fast-paced today than it was last week, but we had so much more to talk about and so little time to cram it into. You gotta hit it because it's been action-packed. It really has.
Yeah, no, it definitely has, and that again, they may or may not be done. We'll see. I don't expect anything major to happen, but we'll see.
I scare you? You think we disconnected again?
I guess that was kind of a little anxiety riddled, but
yeah, I didn't mean to leave you hanging there. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Wrapping up NFL free agency, maybe some more moves still to be made. Not sure how many, but of course, when they happen, we will keep you updated every step of the way. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You got anything coming up this week?
Yeah, not exactly sure when it will be, but I will be looking at the individual signings and putting a grade on them individually. We did overview kind of. I'll be looking at the Buccaneers individual signings and putting a grade on each. So, yeah, like I said, not sure exactly when that'll be, but it'll be over the next few days here. So stay tuned to BucsNation.com for that.
Looking forward to that. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Redicus. And you can also check out my new project at Video Americana, all of that one word, on every platform there is. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, kind of Twitter, TikTok. the cursed TikTok, at Video Americana. We're having a lot of fun with it, and we got a lot of content coming out the coming week. Going to be going on vacation myself, just to kind of peel the curtain back a little bit. If we are slow in content somewhat this week coming up, I will be out of the country. I'm going to Mexico, on the run from the law. A lot of contraband. You wouldn't entirely get it. You've seen movies about it.
Announcing that, but all
I,
right.
we already peeled the onion back on your situation.
That's true.
Yeah, so I mean, you may as well just let it run wild. But yeah, I will be out of the country for a week. We're going to be traveling on a cruise.
Nice.
Is what I was told to say. That was the cover-up story. But
okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, it should be tons of fun. We will keep you guys updated on everything the best way we possibly can. But it'd probably be more efficient to follow Evan. Don't forget at EvanNFL and at Bucs_daily on Instagram. That's going to do it. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will talk to you guys in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for hanging out, and go Bucs.